Okay, thank you for being here today. We're going to get started because we have a lot of ground to cover. My name is Melissa Rosen. I am the Director of Training and Education for Sharsheret. And today we're going to talk about simple coping mechanisms to reduce cancer-related stress in patients. Right now, I am working furiously to admit everybody who's come in, and I'm happy for us to get started. First of all, I just wanted, for those of you who are unaware, to introduce you to Sharsheret. Sharsheret is a national nonprofit organization that provides free psychosocial support for anyone impacted by breast cancer, by ovarian cancer, by a higher diagnostic risk, either because of a known mutation or a strong family history. All of our programs are open to anyone and they are free and confidential. But we do have a specialty in the Jewish community, and we're able to provide culturally nuanced psychosocial support. But again, I want you to be aware that we are open to everyone. Okay. We're going to be together about an hour today, and then I will send you an email afterward on how to claim CE credit. Start by saying that while no studies have definitively linked the stress of cancer to cancer development, we do know that stress does lead to behaviors that have been linked to cancer. We also know that ongoing stress causes some patients to develop a sense of helplessness or hopelessness, which is obviously not what we want. We want empowered patients. So if they're not coping effectively, what is the result of that? Okay, listen, we know that high levels of stress lead to not just things like we would expect, depression, lower quality of life, negative health behaviors, but also health immunity and faster disease progression. So when we help to reduce their stress, not just doing something that is a kindness because they're facing cancer, or even the politically correct thing to do, I want to remind you that when we provide stress reduction tools to our patients, these can actually impact outcomes, right? We know stress weakens the immune system, and so that is exactly the opposite of what we're looking to do here. So I just want to elaborate a little bit on this, and let's take a look at a few studies that were done in 2012 and 2024. You can see here that close to half, 42% of patients presented with either clinical or subclinical symptoms of anxiety during their cancer diagnosis and treatment. And then the same study, actually, there were about 30% who reported clinical or subclinical depression, and that was self-reported, so it's likely it might even be higher, and that's important to keep in mind. Now, I don't know who you work with specifically, but at Sharsheret, we focus on breast cancer. Today's information is relevant to anyone within oncology, but there was another study that actually showed that people with breast cancer actually have the highest levels of depression and anxiety, higher than any other cancer. I think that my computer's not, oh, there we go. Okay, so I'd like to think that the age of COVID is over. We know throughout the start of this winter that it isn't really over. We also know there are other things out there like RSV, pneumonia, and we're more aware of those things. And for someone going through treatment who may be compromised, we know that those who are socially isolated actually have an elevated risk of mortality after a diagnosis, in part because of lack of access to care, but also lack of access to caregiving. Whether it's friends, partners, adult children, parents, whatever it is, that lack of support actually impacts to a heightened mortality, which is a pretty shocking thing to be reminded of. One of the ways that we can help them to lower their stress is to deal with their specific concerns. Listen, there are some concerns that any cancer patient has, common concerns, and that'll be the next slide. But I also want to remind you that every patient has unique influences, right? Culture, faith, family structure, any number of things. And we have to remember that our patients are more than their diagnoses, right? They each with baggage, right? Whether they have whether there's a strong family history, whether they have a heightened medical anxiety, whatever it is, they come with it, and that also impacts. But when we help to meet these non-medical needs, and when we think of non-medical needs, we often think of finances, childcare, we think of rides to treatment or healthy meals, and those are all absolutely non-medical needs. We often forget that culture and faith are, keep that in mind, particularly because it might be, those things might be a very strong, provide a very strong level of support. Okay. Mention some of the common ones, right? We know that someone who's been diagnosed or is concerned about a potential diagnosis, the biggest stressor is uncertainty of the future. Will my treatment be effective? Will there be a recurrence? If somebody is a previvor who has a heightened risk but is not yet diagnosed, is this the screening where I'll finally be diagnosed with what I've come to assume is my fate? Right? And then there's also the side effects. Will they be painful? Will they be long-term, short-term? Will they be permanent? And they're all, some of them seem minor and some of them seem major, but for our patients, they all feel kind of major. Could be, will I lose my fertility or will my hair grow back? But for them right now in the moment, really important to them. And of course, again, social isolation. Remember that it's not just COVID that caused social isolation. A lot of our patients are immunocompromised. And even if they're not, they're spending so much time in the treatment facility or thinking about it. There's an isolation that simply comes from a cancer diagnosis. Patients are spending their time differently than they were, honestly, even the day before the diagnosis. And they're thinking about different things than they were the day before the diagnosis. So there's a physical isolation, there's an emotional isolation that comes despite whether we're in a pandemic or not. And then the practical issues that we've even addressed a little bit already: transportation, dealing with health insurance, financial concerns, and things like that. All of these things, we help them, we improve their outlooks and potentially their outcomes. So before we get into the simple coping mechanisms that we advertised, I want to take a second to talk about the difference between stress and distress. Stress is a normal reaction to a cancer diagnosis and can be considered adaptive in nature. Stress in some ways is helpful to us. It makes us more aware of what our needs are and things like that. On the other hand, distress occurs when the stress is prolonged and can require clinical interventions. So today's coping mechanisms are really there for people who are experiencing stress, right? It's not to replace therapy of any, or other modalities of any kind. It's for the person who might be waiting in the room for the doctor and their heart is pounding. Or it might be for the person who is trying to fall asleep, but their mind is racing. These are things that most of our patients experience. Who need more, they can use these in addition to some of these interventions that we're all familiar with, right? Mindfulness-based stress reduction, cognitive behavioral therapy, peer support, support groups, and behaviors that we all encourage. Exercise, diet, sleep. All of these have been proven to lower levels of pain, insomnia, fatigue, nausea, stress, anxiety, depression, and more. But those are in addition to what we're providing today. Okay, so let's get started. There are a great deal of images and metaphors that we're going to go through. And there's a reason that there's a lot of them. Yes, some of them deal with different experiences within the larger cancer experience, but also some of these are going to resonate with you and they'll be easy for you to remember and therefore share, and others might not resonate so much for you. And that's okay. We know that's going to happen. Use what is helpful to you, what resonates with you to help your patients. So the first one here is unique experience. Imagine a patient coming or you walking out into your waiting room and you see all of your patients there holding boxes on their laps. Well, it's very common for our patients to want to peer into other people's boxes to see what they're going through, right? It might be reassuring to know that other people are going through what they're going through. But the reality is that every patient's box contains something different. And so it's not necessarily helpful to for our patients to peer into other people's boxes, right? Someone might come to your center with more support or with less support. Someone might come in with a pre-existing condition, and even if the diagnosis and the treatment protocols are identical, their responses, both emotional and physical, may be different. So it's important to remind patients that they need it's great to get peer support, what's going on, the specifics of what's going on in anybody else's cancer story aren't relevant to them, and it might even be difficult to hear them. Cancer glasses. So this one, we have to remind our patients that they're not different people than who they were before they were diagnosed, right? They're still the same person. And so it's so common for our patients to say, it must be cancer because this is happening. It must be cancer because I find myself crying all the time, or it must be cancer because my stomach is bothering me, and it must be either the treatment or a metastases or something like that. But the reality is that cancer doesn't change a person's fundamental personality. If your patient was the kind of person who cried at Hallmark commercials or movies on the Hallmark Channel before, they're still going to cry about them today. And it's important to remind them of that. Not everything needs to be viewed through cancer glasses. We know that our patients have an endless amount of brain chatter, right? It's nonstop and it's overwhelming. Cancer can create a nonstop loop that can be debilitating, particularly at specific times like bedtime or while one's waiting for test results. So we need to teach them that that's not healthy and that they need to reduce that brain chatter. And how they do that is by learning to control their own volume control knob, right? Sometimes that brain chatter feels like it's up to a 10 and it's intolerable. A person can't live a productive life while dealing with that amount of chatter. So again, if they know how to lower that, it's okay to a more livable 1, 2, or 3. They also know that when it goes back up to a 10, that's okay because they know how to turn it down. So how do we teach them how to turn down their volume control knob? By letting them know that if they're doing what they need to do, if they're following the plan or getting a second opinion or eating more healthfully or adhering to a strict sleep schedule, if they're doing all they can, then they're as in control as they can be. They're being proactive. And so that allows us to kind of turn that knob down just a bit. Okay, for anyone here who once took driver's ed, this one is for you. When you were in driver's ed and they were teaching you how to manage a skid, they reminded you that you don't do what feels right, which is to turn away from the skid to sort of right the car. You actually turn into the skid, and that's what allows you to right the car. And it's the same thing for our emotions that come with a cancer diagnosis. They need to be embraced. We need to turn into them, because if we don't, if we let them fester, or we try and turn the other way, then that's when our patients sort of, to match the metaphor, skid out of control, right? It can be painful to address the emotions that cancer triggers, but it's worse to not address them. So we don't want our patients skidding out of control. Of course, you could always use the image of a roller coaster, right? We know that roller coasters go down and go down fast, and it's very scary. Personally, I never understood the appeal of intentionally scaring yourself, but we need to remind our patients that there are always ups and downs, and those are to be expected. When one gets on a roller coaster, they expect it. Well, managing a cancer diagnosis is a little bit like getting on a roller coaster, right? There are downs for sure, but there are also ups, and some of those downs are scarier than we anticipated, but that's okay because eventually we level out and even go up again. Some of you may already be aware of the spoon idea of conserving spoons, because this is used within a lot of medical communities, not just oncology. So if your patient is dealing with a lot of exhaustion and fatigue, this is a great one to use, right? Because before your patient goes to bed each night, they need to decide, based on how they feel and what's scheduled for tomorrow, based on how they feel, how many spoons they have, right? A person going through the worst of the treatment at the moment may only have 3 or 4 spoons for the day. A person who's just entering treatment or has moved away from active treatment might have 5 or 6. And then depending on what's scheduled for that day, each activity is a spoon. So we choose the most important activities to conserve energy. For some of our patients, taking a shower will actually use a spoon, right? For others, that's easy, but maybe a big work meeting would use 1 or even 2 spoons. But if your patient knows they have an evening commitment, maybe parent-teacher conferences or something like that, they know that they're going to have to conserve a spoon for the end of the day, right? So that may mean not taking a shower that morning so that you have an extra spoon at night. It's a wonderful metaphor to use. Okay, so I have a colleague who talks about cancer as the big bad wolf, right? Or if you think of the 3 little pigs and huffing and puffing and trying to blow a house in while we try very hard to stay safe in our houses. And she says, actually, no, it's the opposite. Don't let the wolf huff and puff. Open your door and let the wolf in. The wolf, of course, representing anxiety, right? Acknowledge the stress and then keep moving, right? She used to say, I sit the wolf down at my kitchen table. I offer the wolf tea and say, I know you're here. That's fine. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, but I have things to do and you can't stop me from doing those, right? So that's a way, don't your patients aren't going to be able to say, I don't have stress or I'm ignoring my stress. That's impossible. We know even from stress from everyday things that when you try and ignore it, it builds and it builds. But if you acknowledge it, say you're making my life difficult, but I'm going to move forward, then that helps manage the stress. A tangled mess. This is one of the ones that really resonates with me. You have a patient who is overwhelmed with everything that's going on, right? Maybe it's a treatment day and she's gotten her kids off from school and she's on her way to the infusion center and she gets a flat tire. And then she gets a call from the school that her child forgot lunch. And then she remembers that her partner has a really big work presentation and they're probably very nervous about it and a lot rides on it. And all of a sudden, it's just so overwhelming. But if you take that tangled mess of overwhelming challenges and sort of, thread them out or tease them out, pull them apart, they become much easier to deal with, right? Every individual concern is something that's manageable, or most individual concerns is something that's manageable. But when it becomes this tangled mess, it is so easy for all of us, including our patients, to give up, right? So then, okay, if you can do that, you remind yourself that actually you have AAA and they have a shorter than normal wait time and you left a little early, so you'll probably still get to treatment on time. You have a friend you can call who will deliver a lunch to your child's school. And your partner's well prepared for the meeting and there's nothing more that can be done. Those all feel so much more manageable than this tangled mess. I used to, when my kids were younger, I used to ask them when they came home from school, how was your day? And sometimes I'd get the response, it was awful. And I try and do the same thing with them there. I tease it out. Well, what made it awful? Did you trip? Did a friend ignore you? Did you get a bad grade? And it turned out it was one specific thing. She came too late to recess to play games she wanted to play, whatever it is. And I'd say to her, oh, that does feel very sad. I understand that, but it sounds like you had a really bad 10 minutes, not a really bad day. Tell me what happened that was good. Did you get a good grade? Did the teacher call on you? Whatever it is, right? If we remind our patients that each concern should be dealt with separately, they become so much more manageable. Patients, if they're lucky, have a cadre of people who will help them through their cancer experience. And the thing to remember is that everyone is doing their best, and we have to remember what that cadre is, what members of that cadre are good at, and that's particularly important. So, for instance, a telephone here is great when you want to pick up a phone and call somebody, but if you pick up the receiver and try and use it as a hammer a nail into the wall, well, it's going to fail miserably. And it's the same thing with our patient support community. Each person helps in a distinctly different manner, and hopefully each one of our patients has one person that they can just vent to. Some can't hear about the cancer. It's too triggering for them, but they are more than happy to deliver healthy meals or keep our patients company during infusion days, or provide homework help to their children, or whatever it is. And so we remind our patients not to be disappointed that each member of their support team can offer something different. And so if we know what that is, and that's what we ask them for, they're going to be able to help your patients immeasurably. This is another one that really resonates with me. So imagine you have a patient having gone through their first chemo, and it is 2 a.m. the night after, and your patient wakes up and is sick, but it's 2 in the morning and they don't want to call anybody from their healthcare team because it's 2 in the morning. And when it's 9 a.m. and the office opens, a doctor or a nurse calls them back, and they're really dehydrated and they have to go into the hospital to be rehydrated and to deal with the still existing nausea. But prior to the next chemo, the doctor prescribes a regimen of antiemetics and and hydrates her particularly well and assures the patient you're going to be fine this time, excuse me. But of course, you know what I'm about to say, which is it's 2 in the morning and she's ill again, and she is angry and frustrated because how could she be back in the same place, right? How could she be back there? This was addressed already. And the reality is this: she may be, or your patient may be in the same place horizontally, but they're not in the same place vertically. And that makes all the difference, because the higher you climb on the staircase, it gives you the opportunity to look over the railing and see what past experiences are. Time and experience means there are always more tools to use. So this time it's 2 a.m. and she knows to call the helpline because the doctor made it clear. And then the doctor is able to prescribe a different antiemetic. And there's always a 24-hour Walgreens somewhere. And by morning, she is feeling better without the need for hospitalization. There are so many things that are lost during a cancer experience, right? Very practical things, right? Sometimes body parts are lost, hair is lost. Sometimes things that are a little deeper, right? Like independence or the hope for a large family. And sometimes it's really existential. In other words, the dreams that one had for oneself might be lost in this particular case. But you never see a lost. It's always a lost and found, right? Because even cancer can offer new insights and surprising strengths. Personally, as a survivor myself, I hate it when I hear somebody say cancer in the end was a gift, because I don't believe it was a gift. But that doesn't mean that learning about some surprising strengths or some new insights about oneself can't happen and that there isn't benefit from that. And so remind your patients that there are some things that are found. So all of us, including our patients, tend to tell our story, our personal stories, the same way over and over again. But it might be time for your patients to simplify their story. You know, in my community, my story was that I wasn't just the community member that had cancer once, but twice, 2 different types, and that's who I was. But I got tired of that story, right? And I was able to change it, right? Right now, it may feel like your patients, their story is their cancer story is the entire book. Assure them that in the future, it might just be a chapter, right? As they'll do other things. At one point, it might just be a mention, a paragraph, and there will be a time that it's likely that the cancer part of their story is just a footnote in it, right? And that's the power that we have when we determine not what happens to us in life, but how we react to it and what comes from that. And that's a very empowering thing for patients who are likely feeling that their life is a little bit outside of their control at the moment. So they can either, the test of time might simplify the way they think about things, or it could be they take control and do something to pay it forward, even while they're going through it, if they're able. But they're able to both change and in some cases simplify their story. Then there's this one. This one may be my favorite. So I'll tell you, I have a child that lives abroad, and every time for a decade, and every time that I go visit, I pack a suitcase with everything I might need, right? I don't know. We're not really tourists anymore. I don't know if we're going to be hiking or touring or going to museums. I don't know if it's going to be hot or cold because different parts of this country can be very different. So I pack it all. I have a and I pay the price, by the way, by packing it all. I pay the price in many ways. I pay the price emotionally because my partner makes fun of me every time I do it. I pay the price physically because it's hard to drag along a heavy suitcase. And I actually even pay the price financially because the person at the airline check-in counter is more than happy to pay to charge me an overweight fee. I get home, I upload my pictures, and I look and I'm wearing the same 3 outfits almost every day. And it happens every time we visit. And what I should have done is not packed a heavy suitcase, but a convenient day bag. Really, that's what I needed. And that's what our patients need, right? It's so, when someone is diagnosed, it's so common that they want to know, okay, so what's this treatment going to be like? And what's the treatment after that going to be like? And what about surgery? And am I going to need to take aromatase inhibitors and this or that? But that's a heavy burden to carry around. By addressing cancer needs on a day-to-day basis and just carrying them in a lighter day bag, it's both physically and emotionally much lighter and much healthier, right? Maybe today is a chemo day, so your patient needs something to read or their earbuds to listen to music. Maybe they need snacks. Maybe they need dinner delivered to their family and someone to pick their kids up from school. Fine, that all goes in the day bag. And if there's some sort of reaction to the treatment and they need something else, well, there's always, again, a pharmacy they could stop by. Or if a child becomes sick, there's always a friend who can pick that child up, right? You can always add to the day bag, but don't pack it for every eventuality. It weighs us down way too much. And then remind your patients that they are allowed to have cancer-free zones. That is, cancer is not the only thing going on in their lives. And well-meaning people may well ask them, how are you doing today? What's going on? What kind of help do you need? Empower your patients to set boundaries, right? All they need to say is, thank you so much for asking. Today's a cancer-free day. Tell me what's going on with you, right? You're allowed to be somebody out, your patients are allowed to be somebody outside of their cancer experience and need to be. So remind them that they don't have to answer kindly to every question, whether it was just asked innocently or whether it was a little invasive. Again, cancer-free zones are necessary to get through the experience. And if for whatever reason, none of those images or metaphors meets the need of one of your patients at a particular time, just remind them of the impact of breathing, right? Wherever they are, they can close their eyes and take 3 slow breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And at the end of those 3 breaths, they will feel a physical change in their body. It's almost like a physical reset. Okay, let me do this. Great, we're starting fresh at this moment. It makes a huge difference. So I want to take a few minutes to share a little bit more about how Sharsheret can help you help your patients. I am looking at the question, before I transition to this part, I'm looking at the chat box, which I wasn't able to look at before. The one question that probably hasn't resolved are, will these slides be available? So we don't usually make our slides available. I can see if part of these can be, the images themselves can be made available and can send them to anyone who registered. We can probably make that part of it happen. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Sharsheret. Again, we are a national nonprofit and we provide free, confidential, and individualized psychosocial support to anyone impacted by breast cancer, by ovarian cancer, anyone who carries a genetic mutation that raises their risk or has a strong family history. And while we are a Jewish organization and can offer culturally meaningful support that no one else can in the United States, our programs are open to absolutely everybody. Probably a third of our callers have no connection to Judaism whatsoever, and that's really important for you to remember. So think of Sharsheret almost as two buckets. We have our clinical team, which I'm going to get into in a second, and we have our education team, which I'll get into a little bit later. So before I get into the individual programs, the support programs, I want to let you know that we have a cadre, a huge group of social workers across the country, as well as a genetic counselor that take calls all day from patients. We call them callers. And those calls could be as simple as, I'm starting chemo, here's my zip code, where can I find a free or low-cost wig? To, I just got off the phone with my doctor. She says it's malignant. I'm going to see her next week, but she gave me a list of 10 things to do between now and then, and I can't even get out of bed. Can you help me get through this experience or this part of the experience? Sometimes those calls are one and done, and sometimes the relationship with our social workers lasts for years and years, even well beyond their cancer experience. In addition, and by the way, speaking with one of our clinicians or taking a patient taking advantage of one of our programs are all meant to happen as a complementary form of support to what you offer in your hospital, in your practice, and they're not in conflict, they're in addition to. So our programs that we have that are a little more formal, that are meant to help families navigate a cancer experience, include a peer support network that is over 20,000 people strong. And we connect people based on their exact diagnosis, just not you have breast cancer and you have breast cancer, here talk, but you have triple negative and you have triple negative, or whatever it is. And their stage of life, because the cancer experience is so much different for someone who's young and single, someone who's an empty nester, someone who has surly teens or rambunctious toddlers running around their house. So we do that, and sometimes those are just for general support, and sometimes they're for specific questions, like I'm trying to decide between a lumpectomy and a mastectomy, and we'll connect them to two people, one who had each of those. Not for medical guidance, never, ever for medical guidance, but just to hear their experiences. We have a genetics program with a genetic counselor that helps people understand their whether or not they need additional testing or initial testing. Helps them understand what the results mean, whether they're positive or negative for a mutation. Helps them with ideas about how to share this information with family. Our Embrace program is for those who have advanced or metastatic disease. And one of the great things about this program is I've been with Sharsheret for 10 years, and when I started here, it was really about end-of-life prep and care. And today, it's much more about living well alongside cancer. Yeah, we still do the other stuff too, but we have weekly conversations with a specific clinician. We have a Facebook group that's just for people in the Embrace program. We have lifestyle webinars that are specific to people who are living with metastatic disease. And it's a very positive program. This is for caregivers, whether that caregiver is a spouse, a partner, a parent, an adult child, a best friend. We're always reminding people that the caregiver is it has a very broad definition. And not only will we offer support, emotional support to the caregivers, but we'll give them tips on how to encourage their loved one to accept help, which is sometimes difficult, we know. Busy Box, one of my most favorite programs we have, is for families dealing with cancer or the diagnosis of a mutation while raising young children. And the children get a huge box filled with age and interest appropriate toys. They're all customized. And in a sealed envelope underneath those toys for the adults in the household is information about how to talk to children in developmentally appropriate ways about cancer or about BRCA mutations. In other words, my mother isn't sick. Why does she need surgery or something like that? Our Thriving Again kit is our version of a survivorship kit. We created it in collaboration with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it's all about living healthfully after an initial diagnosis, both physically and emotionally. It's a binder filled with healthy living resources. It also comes with exercise bands to ensure range of motion post-mastectomy. And it comes with a choice of beautiful cookbooks. There are 2 or 3 options that patients can choose. And then it's completely customized because a patient, the order form has like 20 additional topics, everything from intimacy after a diagnosis, exercise during treatment, fear of recurrence, smoking cessation during treatment, and so much more. So it's really customized. Our best face forward is for people who are dealing with the cosmetic side effects of treatment. It is filled with paraben and phthalate-free makeups and lotions, and it has eyebrow guides and information on how to use it. And related to our Best Face Forward or BFF kit is our BFF 2.0, and we now offer financial subsidies. This is the only thing we offer that is need-based. However, you should know that we've set the criteria in a way that almost everybody who applies qualifies for it. These are cosmetic effects, things that are non-medical but related to self-esteem, the purchase and styling of a human hair wig, nipple and areola tattooing to complete a breast reconstruction, microblading if someone loses their eyebrows during treatment, and the use of scalp cooling. And so we have that. We also have an emergency fund for someone who is doing okay, but something happened and they need some help. A recent grant from that emergency fund was a woman who was using her car to get to treatment. Her car broke down and she had no way to get to treatment. So we worked directly, not to reimburse her, but to pay the automotive shop directly so she could continue treatment and not have to lay out money she may not have had. We also have educational programs. Trainings like this, we have national educational webinars that are attended not only by patients and caregivers, but healthcare professionals all the time. We do them on a variety of topics, and we usually have 2 to 3 a month. Recent ones included talking to your children about your cancer gene mutation, developing a healthy relationship, a productive relationship with your healthcare team. We've talked about, I'm trying to think of one of the last, another one that we did. And not only are they available, but they're all on our website. If you go under programs, transcripts and recordings. So if there's a topic you're particularly interested in, then they're all there for you. Okay, let's keep going. We actually, something I'm very proud of, we actually just, we just updated our webpage for healthcare providers. So now when you go on this page, it's very clear the options you have. Refer a patient or refer a client for free confidential support. It's actually, you should know, the same form, but we just wanted to make it clear that social workers we encourage to refer and things like that. You can schedule a free training in your place of employment, a more local one. You can request educational resources that we have for you to share with your patients. And we also do patient education. So this talks about all the topics we'll talk about. They're all about managing the psychosocial impact of cancer. All of these things are free, so it's important that you shouldn't hesitate to refer, to order resources, whatever it is, because it's not going to cost your patient or your department anything. If you click the online referral, I just want to give you a sense of what that looks like. You can see it's very little information that's required, some contact information for the patient, some information about where you're practicing in your specialty. And then I want to just bring your attention to what's down here that I'm circling. By checking here, you agree that the patient has agreed to this referral. Obviously, we don't reach out unless somebody wants us to reach out and has given their permission. So you just need to, you can fill this out with the patient in the room, or you can, after a conversation, getting permission, fill it out and just send it in. Within 24 hours, someone from our team will reach out to your patient. There are other ways to do that. You can order postcards that we make that are self-sealing and self-addressed and stamped. And a patient can just check whatever they're interested in. Do they want a peer supporter? Are they facing metastatic disease? Do they want to talk to our genetic counselor or receive a busy box? They pop that in the mail, and as soon as we receive it, we reach out. And if you want to order resources, you'll do so by clicking on that slide, on the slide, the web page I showed you on the slide a couple ago, but just want you to see what it looks like. This is one example of what we offer, and you'll see it's free. You can order a handful, you could order 100, and you can order it as frequently as you want. And it's everything from a diagnostic breast navigator that is a really wonderful chart and dictionary of all the terms they're likely to hear right after a diagnosis. We have a Thriving Against Survivorship piece. We have a piece about financial resources. We have a piece about spirituality for those facing metastatic disease, and so much more. So you can order, like I said, as many of whatever you think would benefit your patients. And before we just spend the last few minutes with a little Q&A, I just want you to consider a few questions, which is there a change you might make to your practice based on what you've learned today, or one thing or one metaphor that can be implemented now to benefit patients? Do you have current patients that would benefit from these metaphors or from being connected to Sharsheret support? And of course, is there a place to display educational resources? Do you have colleagues? I'm going to send you each and that's my email address, which you're all going to get an email from me anyway. So what I'm going to do now is stop the share and tell you that I am going to send you within 15 minutes an email. And there are three important things thank you, Kathy. There are three important things in this email. One is a link to an evaluation you need to fill out. It's a very brief evaluation to be able to get CEs. The second is how to claim your CEs. That's number two. There is an attachment that is the learner's notification. In that attachment is a live link that you will click to claim your CE credit. And then the third is a link to that medical professionals page I showed you so that you know how to access. I am happy, we have a couple minutes left. But I am happy to, while I look through the questions that came in, if anybody has any questions, please put them in to the chat box now. And yes, provided in any state. So our support is available in any state. It has been specifically designed, so it doesn't matter if your patients live in the middle of a major metropolis or a tiny rural community. They have equal access. Our support happens online, through emails, through telephone calls, through text messaging, sometimes through FaceTime or Zoom. Everybody has equal access. And by the way, we help many people outside of the United States too. And almost everything is available to them. Right now, we're not shipping kits because they very often get held up in customs or people are required to pay taxes on them to pick them up. But attending webinars, getting a peer supporter, talking to one of our clinicians, all of downloading our resources, which can be downloaded as well as mailed directly. So downloading our educational resources available to anyone in the world. We actually have, in addition to English, we have a social worker that speaks French. We have one that speaks Hebrew. We have some print resources in both Spanish and in Hebrew. So anyone, somebody asked about CEs for art therapists. At the moment, we're not doing that. I am sorry. Somebody else asked, is support provided to any cancer diagnosis? That's a great question. So Sharsheret is a breast and ovarian cancer organization. That is our expertise. That being said, nobody ever calls without getting some support for us. So what we'll do if somebody calls outside of our normal framework is we will support them in any way that we can. And then we will make a very warm referral to another organization. So for instance, somebody calls with a different kind of gynecologic cancer. A lot of our stuff is relevant, but we don't want them to lose, we don't want them on the support of an organization that works specifically with uterine cancer. Or somebody calls and they have lung cancer, but they're struggling from a cultural perspective. And so we will absolutely reach out and support them with all that we can with culturally meaningful support, but we'll possibly do a warm referral to an organization we work with like Longevity or something like that. It's actually happening more and more frequently because as we're expanding the education we're doing into other BRCA related cancers like prostate, pancreatic, maybe melanoma, certainly breast cancer, male breast cancer, excuse me. So we're getting more of those calls. And again, we never turn anybody down. We offer the genetics that they might be, information that they might be looking for, some emotional, psychosocial support, and then we will connect them to the Male Breast Cancer Coalition or a prostate cancer organization or whatever it is. There is no cost of services. It is not even insurance based. We fundraise so that all of the patient support services are 100% free, whether it's talking to a social worker or receiving one of the kits that I brought to your attention. Yes. How do I request the box for children? So another thing you can do, and it actually goes under that webpage that I'm going to send you, when it says order free resources, you actually have the option to order sample kits. They are not meant to distribute because every one of them is customized, but we will send you a sample kit as well as an 8.5 by 11 flyer in a frame with a QR code on it. So you can say to a patient, look, this is what I was talking about. Great information for you. Wonderful things to keep your child occupied while you're in a waiting room or you're resting a little bit. Just scan here and it'll go directly to the order form and you can order it right on your phone right now. So if you're interested in samples of the Busy Box, the Thriving Again, or the Best Face Forward, you can order them in the same place that you would order copies of the educational resources we have. Are there brochures for each program? There aren't brochures for each program, but I'll send you, we have a piece that sort of lists all of our programs with a brief introduction. Financial assistance is not exclusively for Jewish patients, not like all of our resources. Again, we have a specialty that no other organization has, a little extra value add for your Jewish patients, but all of our resources are available to everyone, no matter their relationship with Judaism or lack of a relationship with Judaism. Is there more information on CBT information? So I can actually, Laura Lawrence asked this, and I'm going to look into that and email you anything that I find. She asked for additional information about mindfulness-based practice and behavioral therapy. The suitcase analogy. Thank you. Somebody really liked that. I hear it. Yes, we do have some Spanish language materials, as I said, and we are working on more. How much for wigs? So, okay, so somebody asked a good question. How much money is given for patients seeking financial support for wigs? We work with certain companies to do it. And so it's not like there's financial support that goes directly to the patient for it. We actually pay the companies we work with, and we have them around. Some of those resources can be done online. Even the wig one where she does a Zoom call with you and takes measurements and everything, but we also have local people who do the tattoos and things like that. And the couple of times people have called and wanted like the nipple and areola tattoos, and we didn't have somebody, the company we work with found someone and trained them locally to do it. Let's see, there were a few more messages. Specific example of, okay, so somebody's asked for a specific example for cultural support, and I'm more than happy to give a couple of examples. So for instance, in the fall, our Jewish like very important Jewish high holidays, it's often a trigger point for our callers because part of the liturgy talks about live and who shall die in the coming year. And as someone who is Jewish, who has had cancer, I can promise you, I said that so many times and didn't give it a second thought. And then the years that I had cancer, I was like, how am I going to say that and not break down? So we talk to people about that. Another example might be hair covering for hair loss. So in some parts of the Jewish community, women cover their hair after they're married, either with caps or scarves or wigs. Well, imagine you have a young patient who was looking forward to putting on a wig her whole life, the day of her wedding, to hear, oh, no big deal about hair loss, we'll get you a wig, it's so they're so beautiful, nobody will ever know the difference, is a painful thing to hear. And not only that, but if she comes from a community where wig wearing after marriage is the norm, I don't care how gorgeous it is, people will recognize it as a wig. And instead of hearing, how can I help you? I'm so sorry, they're hearing, congratulations, I didn't know you got married. So we train doctors and other healthcare professionals about how to address something like that. It's not going to change the fact that a patient might lose their hair, but talking to them differently and making them aware of options is another thing. So those are a couple of examples. Let me just see if somebody asked about financial assistance for fertility preservation. And while we don't offer that, we work with several fertility organizations that do. So we can make those connections. And yes, we are able to help people who are undocumented. That's not relevant to our support. That is it for the questions, which is perfect since we are at the hour mark right now. Thank you so much for coming. Be on the lookout for an email from me within the next 15 minutes, and then you'll all have my email address. Do not hesitate to reach out for any reason. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.